But right now, let's talk to Clay Travis.
All right, he is the founder of Outkick, at Clay Travis on Twitter, and is also seen on Fox Sports. He's with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's happening, Clay? How are you?
I'm great. How are you all?
Doing wonderful. Thanks a lot. You obviously know what we are going to discuss today. And we did, a lot of you wanted to call in. Clay would prefer not to take phone calls here, so we'll point that out for many of you who are asking. But his assumption, I think, Clay, is we're going to ask pretty much the same questions, right? So we'll be the voice of the fan here for the Alabama fan and the other fans. A lot of people think you have treated Brandon Miller unfairly. We'll get to that. I want to start with, you have referred to him as an accessory to murder. He was not charged with that. Do you think Tuscaloosa, obviously you think they got it wrong. Would you insinuate that the Tuscaloosa police or the DA was covering for an Alabama player, was incompetent, got it wrong, made a judgment call the wrong way? How would you characterize what you think the Tuscaloosa District Attorney's Office did?
I'm not getting into the Tuscaloosa District Attorney's Office because I don't know him. But here is what I would just lay out. There are a series of undisputed facts, right, in this case. We know that Brandon Miller drove a loaded handgun to the scene of a murder. That's undisputed. We know that he received a text message at 1:38 a.m., I believe, specifically referencing that he was requested to bring a handgun because there was a dispute in some way that had taken place. We know that mere minutes, maybe moments, we don't know the exact timeline. At least I haven't seen the exact timeline of the moment he arrived and how quickly the gunshots occurred. But relatively quickly after he arrived, the gun was taken out of what appears to be the backseat of his car, and a 23-year-old mother was murdered. And it appears that there were 11 or 12 overall shots that were fired, 8 by the guy who has been charged with the murder, the friend of Darius Miles. And he was, I believe, he has said that he had so much to drink, he doesn't even remember the incident at all. I think that is his testimony, basically. Darius Miles owned the gun, and this 23-year-old mother was murdered. Based on that, to me, there is no doubt that Brandon Miller's behavior was reckless, that it was negligent, and that he should be charged, in my opinion, with a crime. Now, take it outside of Tuscaloosa. Take it outside of athletics. They're typically, so I did criminal law, and obviously I am a lawyer as well. Typically, your general crime, for people who don't know, requires two parts: an act and we call it an actus rea, and an intent, a mens rea. But we know that the act occurred here, right? There was a gun brought to the crime scene. What is disputed is the intent, the knowledge. That is still a bit unclear. What is not unclear to me is that Brandon Miller has clearly behaved in a reckless and negligent manner. And so when I say take it outside of this particular incident, it is frequently the case every day in America that you would have someone charged with a crime based on their reckless or negligent behavior. For instance, you could be driving down the road in a neighborhood, driving too fast, responding to a text message, and the road veers and you don't veer with it, and you hit somebody who is riding on a motorcycle or someone who is jogging along the side of the road. You never had any intent at all to do that, right, when you got behind the wheel. But your behavior, if you are driving too fast and if you are responding to text messages, for instance, is such that you could be charged with a crime despite the fact that you did not have the intent. To me, when you get a text message from someone it is reasonable to believe is drunk, and they say, "Bring me my gun," I'm feuding, and I'm paraphrasing here, I'm feuding with somebody. That is such a reckless and negligent behavior that it does rise to the level of criminal behavior for me. Leaving aside that, even if people disagree with me and they say, well, we're not going to charge Brandon Miller, maybe he is testifying against the shooter in this case. And maybe that's what's going on with the Tuscaloosa DA, right? Like he could be a cooperating witness who is going to testify as to who fired first, which is a big part of this case, because I'm sure that the defendants who have been charged with murder, their primary defense is going to be, we acted in self-defense. They were firing first. They flashed a gun at us. We thought that we were going to get shot, so we had to fire first, right? I'm sure 100% that is going to be their defense. It's possible that Brandon Miller is actually testifying against them, and that is one reason why he has not been charged with a crime, right? We don't know the particulars of what testimony might arise when this goes, assuming it does, to trial. But at a minimum, the standard to me to play basketball or football or any sport at a college is not, did you get charged with accessory to murder? It's your standard of behavior has to be above reproach. We have guys that get suspended every single week in the SEC for missing class, for not having high enough grades, for talking back to coaches, for not fulfilling team expectations. Those are relatively minor things. I'm sure that a huge percentage of people listening to us right now, including myself, have been on teams where guys got suspended for things that were relatively innocuous, but were about the team culture or not living up to team expectations. To me, this is a massive embarrassment to the University of Alabama. I believe that every Alabama fan who claims to be such a stalwart defender of Brandon Miller right now would have the exact opposite opinion if this were a star player for Auburn and every fact was the exact same. And in particular, I think the leadership of the University of Alabama, from the school president to the AD to Nate Oates, the head basketball coach, is an absolute embarrassment. And I think that continued all the way through Saturday when, at the bare minimum, how many people does Alabama employ in the athletic department? 100? How does no one say, hey, let's not do a weapons check for Brandon Miller when he comes out and gets introduced today at the basketball game? I mean, it is just, to me, a colossal failure by the University of Alabama. The university should be ashamed of the way it's handled it. Brandon Miller should not be playing. I think his actions rise to the level of criminal offense, but even if you don't believe that, he has given up his right, the privilege that exists to be a student athlete representing Alabama. And by the way, I don't even think this is a remotely controversial opinion. You play this cut for 95% of sports fans in America, they're going to be like, yeah, Clay Travis is right. And the 5% who are going to disagree are Alabama fans who have sold their souls because all they care about is winning games.
Well, Clay, the majority belief is there is Bama hate here, that you're not being objective. If this was any other school, specifically Tennessee, would you be saying the same thing?
100%. And I've said it for years. Tennessee kicked Bruce Pearl, since he's the coach at Auburn. Tennessee kicked their best player off the team, Tyler Smith, for driving with a handgun off campus in a year that they went to the Elite Eight and I think missed going to the Final Four by 2 points. So Tennessee, Bruce Pearl, since people, want to hear about Tennessee or Auburn, has dealt with a situation that is somewhat similar, although far less serious. And in that circumstance, kicked his best player off the team for having a gun off campus. Like, nobody. If you interviewed Derek Dooley, if you interviewed any former Tennessee coach, Butch Jones, they would all be like, if you said, hey, what media member was the absolute toughest on you during your tenure as Tennessee head coach, I guarantee you they would all say me. Guaranteed. I mean, if you talk to the guy who got fired as AD, look, there are a lot of things you can criticize me for. Pulling punches isn't one of them. I think I am consistently the toughest, probably, on SEC-related shenanigans. Heck, if you want to go back in time and Alabama fans want to read what I said about Cam Newton, I don't know that anybody came out more aggressively on the side of, hey, all the evidence supports Cam Newton got paid and he shouldn't be playing. And Alabama fans were like, man, Clay Travis is the only one telling the truth. Everybody else is carrying the water for Alabama, for Auburn. I don't look over my shoulder. I'm not a person who says, like, oh, let me think about what other people are going to think about this issue. I look at the facts. I analyze them. I tell you exactly what I think. And that's why Outkick is a monster when it comes to sports audience.
Yeah, but Outkick has handled this sloppily, Clay. Outkick has handled this sloppily. And that's part of the criticism on you too,
including calling it Brandon Miller's gun in one post.
That's right. I mean,
in one story,
and that was after the known fact that it wasn't Brandon Miller's gun, and the post stayed up and the story stayed up for more than an hour. That's just sloppy, and I don't blame Alabama fans for being upset with that.
Well, I don't blame them either. I mean, if I wasn't involved in that.
Well, I know, but it's your. I mean, you can't, Clay. You love to take victory laps for all the great things Outkick has done, and you should. It's been a tremendous adventure but you can't just separate yourself when they screw something like that up. I know you don't own the website anymore, but it's natural for people to associate that with you.
I haven't owned the website for 2 years.
I'm aware.
On that particular story, they got it wrong, right? And
they did.
They corrected it.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. I mean, I have a live radio show. I was driving to the airport. I think I didn't know anything about it till Dunaway texted me. And by the time Dunaway texted me, it was already down, but I was going through airport security. Look, I work a lot, but Fox has owned Outkick for 2 years, and there probably are 100,000 words or more a day that go up at Outkick. I'm not responsible for what anybody else writes at Outkick. I'm not. Now, I've created the site, and the site is wildly popular because of me. That's true. But 2 years ago, Fox took over complete editorial control when they bought the site. So, I'd prefer that Outkick never get any fact wrong. And when I became aware that they had gotten that fact wrong, I texted one of our editors. But by that point, it was already down. But I have nothing to do with that. I'm saying I would not change one word that I have said from the moment this story broke. Not one.
So that means you would not change the tweet you sent out during the South Carolina game. Killer instinct showed by Brandon Miller tonight. I mean, you want
Correct.
something that's insensitive, Clay. You lost me on that one. That one was a little insensitive.
I mean, I am a little insensitive sometimes. I mean, that's what I do, right? I mean, I tweet and talk like I would if I'm sitting at a bar. So if that offends people sometimes, deal with it. That doesn't really bother me.
I want to ask you, because where you make your living now in a lot of conservative news talk, there's a lot of talk about policing in America. And many times you've asked us over the years to trust the police, to trust the system. Why are you not trusting the system now in Tuscaloosa? You're miles away. There's police officers on the ground. There's a district attorney. Why now do you not trust the police?
Well, I believe that if Brandon Miller were not a star basketball player, that he would have been kicked off the team and he probably would be facing charges. What I said earlier in my answer is true. I don't know the particulars. They may be giving him immunity from any charges because he is testifying against his former teammate and his friend and saying exactly what he saw. And they may not want that to be out yet because they don't want the pressure on him, right?
But so I would also tell you at this point that Alabama, who did not conduct their own interview because the authorities did not want them interfering with a murder investigation, and you know that to be true too, that Alabama could not conduct their own interviews and find out their own information because the authorities don't want you stepping on evidence or, getting some facts wrong for them as they're conducting a capital murder investigation. So Alabama is sitting here having to deal with the information they're getting from authorities just like the rest of us.
I understand.
So whether you're Greg Byrne or Nate Oates, you're having to play the cards that are dealt to you.
Right. And we know the cards, right? There's undisputed facts here. We know that he drove the gun. We know that all of the shots were fired. We know that he received a text message. Even if you read his attorney.
But we don't know
defense
intent.
statement.
We don't know intent because it's a fact in the documents, right? In the testimony that he's turned over his phone records. He gets a text when he's at dinner. I'm ready to leave the bar. I'm paraphrasing all this, but basically he's there, right? He's ready to leave. The other text comes by the timeline while he's driving. Some people don't check their text every time it buzzes or when they're driving.
I understand.
We're told not to check that. Maybe he didn't get that text until he's there to pick them up from a night of drinking at the bar and drive them back to the apartment.
You're reading in things that are not in his attorney's defense statement. Okay. I've been a criminal defense attorney. You have to read them very closely, right? So, particular, I have that in front of me right now, right? And so if you read that, and I'm putting you on speaker so I can read it, his attorney never says that he didn't receive the text, right? It says he left the restaurant while he was driving, before Brandon arrived, without Brandon knowing any of this context, and as Brandon was already on the way to pick up Mr. Miles texted Brandon and asked him to bring his firearm. This is important. This is his defense statement. He specifically does not say that he didn't receive the text. Many and most, I would say, phones now say if you receive and read a text message, right? It is likely going to be in the record based on this defense. This is his best case, right? This is his defense attorney. His defense attorney specifically does not say that he did not receive and did not know about that text, right? So that's a big deal. People don't read these things very closely. They read into them what they want to. Again, I'm reading directly from his statement. Also, a lot of other people are saying he didn't know the gun was in the car. That's never said in the attorney statement either, right? It says Brandon never touched the gun, was not involved in its exchange in any way, never knew illegal activity involving the gun would occur. He never says in this statement that Brandon Miller didn't know that there was a gun in the car. Like, this is not a very difficult case to me from an Alabama perspective. Again, you're asking me to speculate on what might be going on with the Tuscaloosa investigation. You're right. I do trust law enforcement by and large. I do think they're wildly criticized over the top, oftentimes unfairly. That's why I'm saying it's very possible to me that Brandon Miller is testifying here, and he's actually testifying on behalf, potentially, of the victim here and saying,
but let me ask you, if Alabama suspended Brandon Miller back the day after this murder, right? He didn't play another game at this point with the investigation ongoing, right? If they suspend Brandon Miller back then, and then this comes out in the hearing the other day, I, sitting at home in St. Louis, Missouri, would say, well, hell, Brandon Miller must be guilty too. Alabama suspended him. So what rights does Brandon Miller have?
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. People get suspended for doing dumb things all the time. And a lot of times I don't presume that they committed a crime at all. I mean, Darius Miles might not be found guilty here. Again, Dunaway, just take a step back. All I'm saying is it is undisputed, right, that Brandon Miller drove a loaded handgun to the scene of a murder, that he knew the handgun was in the car, that he knew that he got a text message that his friend, who may well have been drinking all night, was having an issue with someone else, and he took the murder weapon to that venue. If he had just said, hey, man, I'm sending you an Uber, I'm drunk, I'm going home, make up something. Hey, it's too late, I'm not putting you, get in an Uber, we don't need to get in trouble, we're having a great season, don't be a knucklehead, get in the car and drive home. That mom would still be alive. Brandon Miller's actions were so reckless and so negligent, in my opinion, that he does not deserve to represent the University of Alabama based on the undisputed facts, not only from the court hearing, but also from his own attorney's statement. He does not deserve to be an Alabama basketball player right now.
And listen, everyone can have their opinion about whether he should be playing or not playing. And I've gone back and forth many times on whether he should be playing or not playing, and it's very odd right now watching him play during this process. I'll be honest with you. It's odd watching the games. But if you go back and they suspend him back then,
right, but Dunaway,
would that have been okay?
Right. Well, no,
at that point, if they suspended him 2 games, 4 games, 6 games, what would have been, in your opinion, the proper way to handle this while a murder investigation is going on, while he's not a suspect, while he's cooperating? I don't understand what would have been.
I'm taking
enough.
you at your
right.
hypothesis there. I'm not criticizing Alabama for what they did after January 15th. I'm criticizing them for what they did once the undisputed facts are now clear. He should have been immediately suspended the moment that court hearing occurred and the moment that they looked at the statement that his attorney put out. I'm talking about since then. Prior to this, if you take Alabama at their word, they didn't know the specifics of what were going on in this case, and they were trying to ignore it. Okay, so I'm not saying anything about January 15th all the way up to when did this story come out? Tuesday afternoon? I'm nodding and
Tuesday.
saying, okay, Tuesday afternoon, they have the court hearing. That's, under oath. There are undisputed facts. Then you have it combined with the statement that I was just reading from Brandon Miller's own attorney. There are a series of undisputed facts that the University of Alabama now knows that they did not know prior to Tuesday. Those facts, all of which are undisputed, and again, driving a murder weapon to the scene of a murder, receiving a text message specifically alerting you to the fact that there is some form of beef going on, and then having a woman get murdered, he has to be gone off the team, in my opinion, and out of school. Because, look, one woman died, and she's got a 5-year-old son, and that is a brutal and awful story. But I believe there were at least 11 shots that were fired. If 3 or 4 University of Alabama kids get hit by those shots, is there any way that Brandon Miller is still playing? If 3 or 4 Alabama University students die in this shootout that he facilitated by bringing a gun to the corner when he knew there was a beef, is there any way that he's still enrolled at the university and representing the team?
You're back assuming he knows there's a beef, and we can wind it down here.
By his own
I don't know if he knows there's a beef at that point.
He does by his own attorney's statement, because any attorney worth his salt, again, pull it up in front of you right now. The attorney
and I grew up in a different place, Clay. If I show up, I'm not sure there's somebody's going to fire shots. I may show up to an argument, and still, I don't know if people are going to actually pull out a gun.
Okay, shoot, I understand.
We can go around and around on that, but Lance has something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you. And look, I want to ask you to play real quick. I want to ask you to speculate one more time. Just gut feeling. If this was Kansas, if this was North Carolina, if this was UCLA, if this is any of the other 13 SEC schools, how do you think they would handle it?
I think the bigger the program is, the more likely it is that there's no way that the guy is still representing the school. Like Duke, if Duke has a basketball player bring a loaded handgun to a campus corner and somebody gets shot, killed, there's no way that player is still playing. I think the pressure would be higher at a Duke, a Kentucky, a Kansas, because they're bigger national brand stories. It's still a big story. I think this would be a bigger story for Alabama if it were football. Because football is obviously more of a connoted with the University of Alabama. And by the way, to your point earlier, Dunaway, on the if I've been out with LT a bunch of games, right? A bunch of Alabama games over the last 15 or 16 years. And we may have consumed alcoholic beverages at a few of those games, off and on.
Right.
If we end up at a different spot, if you and me, Dunaway, are hanging out somewhere different, and LT texts me, and he's like, "Hey, bring me my gun. This dude is disrespecting me. It's 1:40. I know that LT has been out at the bar all day. There's no way on earth that I'm driving the car to LT. I'll also with a gun. I'll also point out this, and I think this is significant.
And I agree with you. I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either.
Yeah, right. If you didn't know there was a gun in the car, when you got texted about the gun in the car, you'd be like, holy crap, what are you talking about? If somebody suddenly texts me and says, hey, bring me the kilo of Coke that I put under, under a T-shirt in the back of your car, I'd be like, the kilo of coke, right? Like the presumption of the text is bring me my gun, meaning I think you can reasonably presume that that Brandon Miller knew the gun was in the car. And I would also say, having been to some of those places on the Strip in Tuscaloosa, it would further make sense that a gun might be left in a car when somebody goes into a club, because many of those places wand you when you enter into them, meaning you would not be able to keep your gun with you. So again, I think that Brandon Miller's behavior, leaving aside the question of whether it is criminal, I think it was reckless and negligent enough to classify as a crime, which is why I think that a part of this story may well be that Brandon Miller is testifying on behalf of the state, right? That is, he is testifying.
That's speculation. Yep.
Yes, but that is something that I think could be occurring here. When you say that he has been cooperating with authority, but leaving aside the criminal charges, the mere fact that he has done all of these undisputed things, to me, makes it clear that once Alabama had that information on Tuesday, and once they had his defense statement, the best possible version of the story from his perspective is still not a very good version of his story, right? It specifically doesn't say that he had no idea there was a gun in the car. It doesn't say that he never received this text. All it says is he didn't touch the gun. And so to me, that is way past needing enough for him to no longer be representing the University of Alabama as an athlete.
But his attorney's statement, Clay, which is easily corroborated by available video, and the city of Tuscaloosa, or Tuscaloosa police, excuse me, the district attorney, they have a ton of video. Every bar on that strip's got video running. It disputes one of the facts you used to further convict him, which is that he blocked them in. You tweeted, Miller's car blocking the road here, allowing the murder is also a big deal. And the attorney's statement says that did not happen at all. And that's no attorney is going to put something like that in a statement, Clay, knowing that video is out there that absolutely contradicts that point.
Well, first of all, attorneys put things in statements all the time that contradict the evidence. I mean, that's the job of the defense attorney.
Do you really think an attorney would say that, though, knowing that there is video that shows the exact opposite?
Yes.
You think an attorney would do that? A statement and say, this is, look, I know Tuscaloosa's got video that says they didn't intentionally block him in, but I'm going to lie about it?
O.J. Simpson's attorney. Well, you can lie about what – no. Look, this is what being a defense attorney is. You can argue about what the facts reflect, i.e., he may have parked there, but he wasn't intending to block that vehicle, right?
Okay.
So, again,
his vehicle got there first is the statement, easily corroborated.
I have not even mentioned that as needing to be a factor here in whether he is represented by Alabama or whether his behavior is reckless or negligent. I'm just leaving that aside.
You did 6 days ago.
I still think that it is worthy of being contemplated. I'm just saying that is a disputed fact, okay? I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about undisputed facts. He drove a murder weapon to a corner to his teammate and his friend after receiving a text message that said that there was a dispute and someone needed their gun. It's reasonable to presume that if someone says that they need their gun and you take it there, that the gun may well be used. That is, to me, again, just based on it's undisputed. Those facts are not disputed. That is reckless and negligent behavior, in my opinion. And that is
enough for you to call him an accessory to murder, which you have.
Yes.
Without him being charged for it.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, that's you're right. And for the record, I don't disagree with everything you're saying. I do believe that, and I don't blame Alabama fans for thinking because you are a Tennessee fan, how hard you've gone at Alabama, that colors some, and I'm not saying you wouldn't do it against Tennessee as well, but I think it's naive to say you haven't gone at Alabama harder than you would Washington. If this were a Washington player or a UCLA player, you would not have gone this hard at him. You're going harder at him because he's an Alabama player. That's realistic.
I don't think it's that. What I would say is I'm covering this case more because it's in the SEC. There's no doubt.
That's true. Yep.
If this were a University of Kentucky player, I don't think I would have behaved any different at all if this were a University of Tennessee player, I don't think I would have behaved any different at all. I probably would not have paid as much attention. I think that's fair. If it was a University of Washington player, frankly, because we and me have typically not covered, controversies at the University of Washington because that hasn't been traditionally the base of stories that I talk about. So yes, I mean, look, I talked about the Missouri race hoax case way more than I would have if Mizzou hadn't been in the SEC. I talked about Cam way more than I would have. Now, we do talk a lot about Big Ten stories. So, if it's Terrell Pryor controversies or whatever else, like I think if it were Ohio State or it were Michigan, it was a Big Ten story, I probably would have also been in it in a big way. But yes, we cover SEC and Big Ten controversies, both myself and Outkick, more than we would elsewhere. But, to me, this is not a sports story primarily. To me, the person who bears the most blame, who's the University of Alabama president? Stuart Bell. He is the decider here, right? When you are the university president, you ultimately are the decider when it comes to university-related issues. I can make you an argument that Nate Oates and Greg Byrne, the coach and the AD, because they are directly involved in athletics, I can see their argument for, hey, we're going to try to protect Brandon Miller in this scenario, right? They're at least directly connected to athletics. To me, this is where the university president has to step in and say, look, basketball, football, whatever it is, the seasons don't really matter. The University of Alabama is my entire purview, whether it's the chemistry department or the basketball team. And if we're doing something that is so newsworthy for its I think leniency that it is on the being covered in British newspapers, then that's something that is a stain on the University of Alabama. This guy should be suspended. I blame the university president because ultimately he is the decider in this case, and I think the facts are pretty clear that Brandon Miller shouldn't be playing.
All right. We know you have your own show to do, Clay. Thank you for the time. We appreciate the discussion, and have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Hey, appreciate y'all. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the floor, man.
Was that a shot? Did Brown just go see you next Tuesday?
Clay comes on every single Tuesday. I mean, what do you want me to say? Clay, see you next week. All right.
Wow.
Thank you, Clay. Clay on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.